Outside the Civic Center in 1976, the crowd was thinning. Then Elvis stopped mid-step. From the shadows, a small voice sang, "Can't help falling in love," clear, trembling, and perfect. Before we step inside this unforgettable night, make sure you're following for more true emotional stories of music legends whose kindness changed lives forever. The summer night had that post-concert restlessness, heat still clinging to the pavement, the air buzzing with leftover adrenaline. It was just after 10:30 p.m., outside the Knoxville Civic Center. Elvis Presley had finished his encore only minutes earlier. Backstage doors swung open, letting out bursts of noise, roadies shouting gear lists, the faint hiss of amplifiers cooling down. Security moved ahead of him, clearing the narrow lane that led to a waiting Cadillac. Then, he stopped. Some witnesses say he tilted his head first, almost like he wasn't sure he'd heard it. Others recall him freezing mid-step, one foot still in motion. Over the low thrum of diesel generators came something small, pure and steady. A boy's voice, singing his song. The words floated just above the noise. Wise men say, only fools rush in. Each one holding onto the humid Tennessee air. Elvis turned. There, by the chain-link fence that wrapped around the service exit, stood a boy no older than his jacket swallowed him whole, sleeves pushed up past his wrists. Under one arm, he held a piece of cardboard with big block letters. "I can't get in, but I can sing for you." His voice didn't have power, but it had something else, a kind of urgency that made the few remaining fans on the sidewalk go quiet. A security guard shifted uneasily, murmuring, "We should keep moving." Elvis didn't answer. Instead, he took a few slow steps toward the fence. The boy's eyes widened, but he kept singing. His knuckles were white from gripping the sign. A woman in the small crowd pulled her daughter closer. Camera flashes popped, not the blinding burst of professional press, but the quick, uneven flash of pocket camera. The smell of popcorn from a vendor down the block drifted into the scene, mingling with exhaust fumes from the idling limos. Elvis stopped only a few feet from the fence. He looked down at the boy's sneakers, worn, one lace untied, then up to meet his gaze, silent. Even the boy stopped singing. For a second, no one breathed. Then, in a low, calm voice that carried in the night air, Elvis said just 4 words. "Sing it again, son." The boy's chest rose and fell once. Then he nodded, and as the first note left his lips, the crowd around them leaned in, sensing that whatever was about to happen next would be remembered. The boy's second attempt would bring Elvis closer than anyone expected. The first note wavered, the second was strong. By the third, Elvis had tilted his head, one corner of his mouth pulling into the faintest smile. He started keeping time with his fingers, a small tap against his thigh, just enough for the boy to note. Witnesses recall what happened next, as if it were slow motion. Elvis took half a step closer, dropped his voice into the harmony, and the sound changed instantly. His deep baritone wrapped around the boy's clear tone, like it had always been meant to. The street light above them buzzed, then flickered. The pavement shimmered with the thin sheen of late summer humidity. A woman in the crowd whispered, "I've never seen him do this before." Her voice was barely more than breath, but people nodded without taking their eyes off the pair. Flashbulbs went off, catching the sparkle of Elvis's rings, as he gestured softly for the boy to keep going. Every movement was deliberate. A nod here, a small lean toward the fence there, like he was guiding the boy without taking control. The smell of popcorn drifted closer, as someone in the back stepped nearer. Somewhere, a car radio played faintly from an open window, static crackling in the pauses. The chorus swelled. Elvis's voice, steady and low, carried the weight of thousands of performance. The boy's voice carried something else entirely, the raw, unpolished truth of a dream being lived in real time. Security glanced at each other. This wasn't in the plan. Their eyes darted between Elvis, the boy, and the tightening circle of fans. Elvis crouched, dropping to the boy's level. The gold chains around his neck caught the dim yellow of the streetlight. "You know the second verse?" he asked quietly. The boy nodded and went straight into it, barely missing a beat. Elvis grinned, nodded in approval, and sang along, but softer now, letting the boy's voice take the lead. For a moment the crowd didn't exist. It was just the two of them, trading lines in the cooling Tennessee night. When the song ended, the boy's breath came in quick bursts. Elvis clapped once, sharp, intentional, and the crowd followed, a wave of applause rolling down the block. The boy smiled, but it was shy, almost as if he didn't know what to do next. Elvis, however, seemed to know exactly. He stood, looked over his shoulder at security, and raised his eyebrows. Then, in front of everyone, Elvis made a decision that would break every rule of his own security team. He pointed at the locked service gate and said, "Open it." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elvis Presley had just told his security to open the gate. For a split second, no one moved. The bodyguard closest to the lock glanced at the others, waiting for someone to say no. No one did. With a reluctant click, the padlock swung open. Elvis stepped forward, closing the gap between him and the boy. He placed a large ringed hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Let's finish this where it belongs," he said, voice low but firm. The boy looked like he might float right out of his oversized jacket. Security flanked them as they crossed into the service lane, the smell of warm asphalt and faint gasoline clinging to the air. The arena loomed ahead, its back doors still propped open. From inside came the distant metallic clank of mic stands being collapsed. They walked side by side, Elvis slowing his usual brisk pace, so the boy could keep up. Their footsteps echoed in the empty corridor, the faint squeak of the boy's sneakers against the polished floor, a soft counterpoint to Elvis's steady stride. Inside, the main hall was nearly dark, lit only by a few stage work lights. Crew members were rolling thick cables into loops, their chatter stopping when they saw who had just walked in. The smell was unmistakable, a mix of sweat, wood polish, and that faint perfume that always lingered after a packed show. Elvis led the boy toward the stage, his white jumpsuit catching every stray beam of light. He stopped at the foot of the stairs, turned to the boy and said, "Ever held one of these?" He held out his microphone, the metal still warm from the show. The boy shook his head. "Go on," Elvis encouraged, handing it over. The boy's fingers wrapped around it, knuckles pale. Elvis stepped up onto the stage first, then offered his hand to pull the boy up. From this angle, the empty rows of seats stretched into the shadows, thousands of them. It felt like standing in the middle of a sleeping giant. "Start from the top, Elvis." The sound tech, who'd been halfway through winding a cable, froze. Then slowly, he walked over to the board and slid a few switches. A low hum filled the air, followed by the faint feedback squeal of the live mic. The boy took a deep breath and began to sing. His voice carried farther now, bouncing off the high ceiling and polished floor. Elvis stood just behind him, arms crossed, listening intently. As the boy climbed toward the high note, Elvis' expression shifted, his jaw tightening, eyes narrowing slightly. It wasn't criticism, it was something deeper, something almost like recognition. Whatever memory that note stirred in Elvis, it was about to change the night entirely. The note hung in the air, pure and steady, until it faded into the shadows of the empty arena. Elvis didn't move at first. He leaned against the black grand piano at stage right, one hand resting on its glossy lid, eyes fixed on the boy. The low stage lights reflected off his sunglasses, hiding his expression, but not entirely. A single breath escaped him, slow and heavy. "Who taught you that?" he asked finally, his voice softer now, almost private. The boy glanced down at the microphone, then back up. "My mom," he said. "She's in the hospital tonight. She sings it to me before I go to sleep." The air seemed to tighten. Even the small crew scattered around the stage stopped what they were doing. The sound tech leaned an elbow on the board, eyes locked on the scene. Elvis' shoulders lifted with a long inhale, then fell again. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he walked toward his guitar case, crouched and unlatched it. The faint click of the latches, echoed in the quiet. From inside he pulled out his acoustic guitar, the worn strap creaking as he slung it over his shoulder. The body of the guitar caught a dull amber from the work lights above. He strummed once, low, resonant, and the sound filled the room. Then he began the opening to another ballad, not one of the big hits, something quieter, more personal. The boy hesitated, eyes darting between Elvis's fingers and his face. Elvis gave him a small nod. "You know this one?" The boy nodded back, and joined in, his voice thinner this time but steady. The two sang together, Elvis's chords wrapping around the melody like a safety net. From the wings, a stagehand leaned against a lighting truss, arms folded, watching. Another crew member set down a coil of cable and sat cross-legged at the edge of the stage. Halfway through the song, Elvis stepped back, letting the boy sing alone for a verse. His eyes stayed on him, but there was something far away in his gaze, the look of a man remembering a voice from long ago. When the last chord faded, Elvis didn't put the guitar away. Instead, he handed it to a nearby stagehand, without a word, and walked toward the backstage curtain. The boy turned, unsure if he should follow. Elvis paused in the shadow of the curtain, looked back over his shoulder and said, "Stay right there." And then, without warning, Elvis walked backstage, and came back with something the boy would keep for the rest of his life. The curtains parted again, and Elvis stepped back into the work lights. In his hands he carried two items, a white silk scarf folded neatly over one arm, and a worn leather guitar strap draped over the other. The scarf shimmered faintly in the yellow light, the strap darkened at the edges from years of use. He walked to the boy without hurry. The sound of his boots on the stage boards was the only noise in the room. "These are yours now, Elvis." The boy's eyes wide. He didn't reach for them immediately, almost afraid to. Elvis leaned down, resting one knee on the stage, so they were face to face. He lifted the scarf and placed it gently around the boy's neck. "Looks better on you anyway," he said with a small grin. Then he held up the guitar strap. "This one's been with me a long time." He stepped behind the boy, looping it over his shoulder and adjusting the length with practiced fingers. The faint scent of leather and cologne drifted between them. The boy's hands trembled as they brushed against the smooth scarf fabric. From the wings, a few crew members whispered to each other, one of them lifting a small camera to capture the moment. There was no press here, no official photographers, just a handful of people who knew they were watching something they'd never forget. "Your mom's gonna want to see you wear that, Elvis." The boy smiled for the first time without shyness. Elvis turned toward a mic still set at center stage. "One more," he said. He strummed a gentle rhythm on the acoustic guitar that had been brought back to him. The boy's voice rose to meet it, the silk scarf swaying slightly as he sang. No band, no crowd roar, just the soft scrape of calloused fingers on guitar strings, and a child's voice carrying through an empty hall. When they finished, Elvis didn't say anything right away. He gave the boy's shoulder a firm, steady squeeze, the kind that says more than words. From somewhere in the darkened seats, a slow clap started, building into applause from the scattered crew. The boy looked around, cheeks flushed, scarf still around his neck. Elvis stepped back, hands on his hips, and nodded toward the stage stairs. "You're gonna be late getting home." The boy laughed once, quick and quiet. They walked off stage together, Elvis a step behind, almost like he was letting the boy lead the way now. A week later, at the boy's doorstep, a package would arrive that would turn this night into legend. 7 days later, the morning air in the boy's neighborhood was cool and still. Dew clung to the grass. The sound of a delivery truck's brakes squealed just beyond the gate. A brown package was set gently on the front porch. No return address, only the boy's name written in neat black letters. He crouched beside it, fingers running over the tape. His mother, home now from the hospital, watched from the doorway. "Go on," she said. The box gave a soft thunk when he lifted it. Inside, resting on a bed of tissue paper, was a small acoustic guitar. The wood gleamed as if it had never been touched. Its strings caught the light, faintly vibrating from the movement. Tucked under the neck was a folded note. The paper was thick, the ink bold and steady,
You'll always have a seat in the front row. Elvis. The boy handed the note to his mother. She read it aloud, her voice catching on the last word. She read it again. Softer this. Neighbors say the guitar stayed in that living room for decades. Not in a case, not on a wall. In the corner, where anyone who visited could see it. The silk scarf stayed looped over the strap, exactly as Elvis had placed it that night. When the boy grew older, he learned to play it well enough to sing for his own kids. Sometimes, late in the evening, he'd sit in the same corner, the scarf still draped there, and tell them about the time the king heard his voice outside an arena. He never claimed it was destined. He never said it made him special. He'd just smile and say kindness is louder than the biggest crowd. And for those who were there that summer night in 1976, the memory is just as sharp. The street light buzzing, the low hum of generators, and Elvis Presley, stopping mid-step, because a boy dared to sing to him through a fence. That single choice, to stop, to listen, to invite, turned an ordinary walk to a car into a story passed down for generations. Some stories live in records and photographs. This one lives in the feel of worn leather, the faint scent of silk, and the sound of a guitar that arrived one quiet morning, carrying a promise from a man who kept it. True greatness isn't in the size of the stage. It's in the moments you step off it.
If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes music and kindness can change a life, and tell me in the comments what's the one act of kindness you'll never forget.